Are you living a life that you've been programmed to live, which is ordinary? Or are you living a life that you were created to live, which is extraordinary? I want you to close your eyes for a moment, and I want you to imagine yourself in captivity. I mean, a really, really bad situation. I want you to really think about what that feels like. You're handcuffed, you're shackled, you're bound, gagged, tied up, blindfolded, and thrown into a cage. Imagine what that would be like. What would you do to escape? Seriously, what would you do to escape? You're in captivity, freedom is right on the other side. What would you do to escape? And I ask this question in my workshops, and people come up with all kinds of things that they would do to escape. Oh, I would chew through the duct tape so that I could scream for my life and get help. I would break my wrist and slide it out through the handcuff so that I could get away. Or I would just knock myself on the floor, kick myself over to the cage, and bang on it until someone answered. So there's this idea that when we find ourselves in a very difficult situation, we will do whatever it takes to escape, right? But the reality is that when you no longer feel that you are in control of your destiny, you eventually give up and you accept the situation exactly the way it is. So while we're created to do extraordinary things, most often we're so limited by our past experiences that we just live an old, ordinary life. Programmed ordinary, created extraordinary. I used to love the circus as a little girl, and it was mainly because the elephants, I was always fascinated with how obedient an elephant could be. I mean, this elephant is like huge. It could knock down the whole tent, but it just is so obedient to the ringmaster. It doesn't even try to escape, and that always fascinated me. So what I learned was, when an elephant is in captivity, is a baby, it's tied to a big tree with a thick rope or a heavy chain every single night. And because it's within the elephant's nature to roam free, it continues to tug and tug because it wants to get away. But because the elephant is not yet strong enough, it's unable to break free. So it tries and it fails, and it tries and it fails so many times that it eventually gives up. And not just then, but for the rest of its life. So now this elephant is full grown, it's huge, it's 12,000 pounds. And it could very easily knock down a house, uproot a tree, break any rope or chain. But it doesn't. Because it's been so programmed by its past limitations that it totally is unaware of its present abilities to be free. Can you imagine being so scarred by the problems of your past or the situations of your past that you would rather stay in captivity than to escape and experience true freedom? Think about that. It's this programming. Where does this programming occur? For most of us, by the time we're teenagers, we're already programmed. I mean, if you're not a great athlete, you don't have straight A's or good grades, and you're not popular, you're already programmed to believe, to just accept the situations just the way they are. For me, that programming occurred when I was 4 years old. I loved school, I loved to learn, and I went to a Head Start program in Queens, New York. Anybody here from New York? All right. So I go into class this day, and the teacher, Miss Stewart, is sharing what she's going to teach us for the day. So she says, today we're going to learn something new. I'm like, yes. because I loved new things. I loved learning new things. And then she says, we're going to learn our numbers in Spanish. I'm like, oh, I already know them. So she's like, oh, you do? Say them then. Like she didn't believe me. So I go on, and this is like my moment to shine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. She's like, hold up. Wait a minute. You already know them? You go sit in the corner. Oh, that hurt my heart. I was excluded from the lesson, so I was forced to watch everyone interact and be excited about learning, just the very thing that I love to do. She ignored me for the rest of the day. And when I raised my hand to go to the bathroom, she wouldn't let me go, and I wet my pants. So at that moment, I was programmed to believe that maybe being smart wasn't such a good idea. That maybe this life that I desired to always want to learn would only get me punished, would only get me excluded, and would get me laughed at. So I started walking out this ordinary life. It was better to be just like everybody else. And by definition, ordinary is unexceptional, below average, mediocre. And this just became what I did. I mean, I failed English twice, y'all. I'm a writer. Like, that makes no sense. By the time I was 30 years old, I had 13 addresses. Every car that I ever had was repossessed. I had racked up 5 felonies, $50,000 in fines and restitutions. And the only work that I could get was part-time, commission work, earning less than $10,000 a year. That sounds pretty unexceptional, right? That programming of being ordinary led me right into a courtroom, standing before a judge who determined that I was a habitual offender, that I would serve the next 7 years in prison as inmate OL 8397 with the Pennsylvania State Department of Corrections in a maximum security facility. So I'm standing in court, handcuffed and shackled. And there's this idea that when you're in a really bad situation, you'll do whatever it takes to escape. So I tried that. Your Honor, would you please, I'm begging you to reconsider. I have 2 small kids that are going to get off the bus at home, and I will not be there. And I have no one to take care of them. I said, if at least I could have time to prepare, if you would just grant me that request. He says, okay, young lady, did you have these children when you committed these offenses? I said, yes, sir, Your Honor, I did. He says, well, your request is denied, and your sentence starts today. So I'm standing there, handcuffed and shackled, just like the elephant. And in that moment, I felt just like I was in captivity, bound, gagged, tied up, blindfolded, and thrown into a cage. But the reality is, when you feel like you are no longer in control of your destiny, which I didn't, and you have this idea that you want to give up. I really felt like giving up at that point. But there's one difference between human beings and the elephant, is we have the ability to choose. So at that moment, handcuffed and shackled, I chose to no longer live this ordinary life, this unexceptional, this below average, this mediocre life. I determined at that moment that I never would let anyone take control of my destiny but me. So because I chose I'm no longer tied to the limitations of my past. Because I chose, I am not living up to the label of ex-offender. Because I chose, I have no connection to this recidivism rate. I beat the odds. And because I chose, I make a heck of a lot more than $10,000 a year. So I know some of you are thinking, that's a great story, but I've never been to prison. But maybe you have. Maybe you're in prison right now. And not a physical prison. Maybe it's one of your own making. Maybe you're just like the elephant. So are you living the life that you've been programmed to live, which is ordinary? Or are you living the life that you've been created to live, which is extraordinary? You choose. I chose.